Did you know that if your child's behavior issues, if they have behavior issues, if your school district fails to consider provide behavior supports in your child's IEP, then your child is likely not receiving a free and appropriate public education. Did you also know that your child on an IEP is 2 times more likely than their typical developing peers to be punished with suspension or expulsion? Well, today is my part 2 of my 3-part series, the school to prison pipeline. And I'm going to be giving you 3 steps you can take today to ensure that your child is not placed on the school to prison pipeline. Now, please leave your comments below, parents, because I'd love to hear from you. If your child exhibits behaviors at school that impede their ability to access the curriculum and to learn, then you want to be able to know what your rights are and what procedural safeguards you have to protect your child from being suspended and possibly expelled and put into the school to prison pipeline. So, the school to prison pipeline, I want you to go back to part 1, which I did last Monday, because I gave a really good foundation on what the school to prison pipeline is. But in a nutshell, what the school to prison pipeline is that if your child exhibits any kinds of disciplinary problems at school, they are placed on an accelerated path of criminalizing special needs students because of the disciplinary policies and practices within schools that put students in contact with law enforcement. And the problem also is that educators and teachers have little or no training in mental health or behavioral problems, yet the behavior intervention that is given to your child is left up to teachers in the classroom. So what happens is our kids are labeled when they get placed on an IEP. They're labeled, this is a kid in an IEP who has behavioral issues, and the spotlight's put on them. They're constantly having data collection taken on them throughout the day. Their behaviors are being scrutinized and looked at throughout the day, and so it stands out to them. A general ed kid, their behaviors aren't being scrutinized throughout the day. They're not under a microscope having data collection taken on them constantly. So it puts our kids at risk of being targeted for suspensions. And this is why it's so important for you to know the 3 steps I'm going to give you today on how to protect your child from being targeted and possibly being put in the school to prison pipeline. So what should happen, parents, is that if your child is exhibiting behaviors at school that are problematic behaviors that are causing your kid to get suspensions or disciplinary actions, like getting, after school, I can't think of the name now. What do they call that when they pull the kids out and they get detention? If your kid gets detention all the time, and there starts to be a pattern when they're little, and little kiddos, they have behaviors all the time like meltdowns and screaming or crying or running and eloping out of the classroom or not being able to follow rules. So, you don't want to let that go to where then they get used to that behavior because it's never addressed and they're never helped to learn through positive interventions. And then by the time they're in junior high, they start getting suspended and then they start getting expelled. So these behaviors should trigger the IEP team to call an IEP and say, hey, look, this kid's having behavioral issues. We need to look further. We need to take some data collection further. We need to decide how can we help this child. Do some interventions to help the child. But the problem is that doesn't happen. So it's left up to moms and parents to make sure that your child gets the interventions that are allotted to you under IDEA, and that's what I'm going to be talking about with you today. So short-term general ed disciplinary actions and suspensions have proven that many children with disabilities are not receiving appropriate behavioral interventions in their IEPs. So they know that typical punitive disciplinary actions that's given to a general ed student does not work for kids on IEPs. It doesn't work. Because if you suspend a child on an IEP and they get to stay home, that's a reward to them. That's not a punishment. That doesn't teach them anything. So then they're going to go do it again so they can stay home again. And it's like that across the board. If a child's having a maladaptive or a disruptive behavior in the classroom, and then they get taken out of the classroom, or they get to get out of something that they were having a behavior about, that's a reward. It's not teaching them that, oh, you're bad, and so you're going to have to go to the principal's office. Well, they got out of the lesson or whatever demand they wanted to get out of. So it's actually in a reward. So those kinds of disciplinary actions, which are punitive, don't work for kids on an IEP, which is why we have functional behavior assessments, behavior support plans, and ERMS assessments. So what is a functional behavior assessment, okay? Because that is the first thing you are going to ask for is a functional behavior assessment. So it is a direct observation of the student and must be carried out only by a person who has been thoroughly trained on collecting and analyzing this type of information. So it must be done by a BCBA, okay, which is a board certified behavior analyst. That's who it must be done on by an FBA. But many times the school will have a psychologist do the FBA. Now, they're legally allowed to do that, but the psychologist must be highly trained and highly knowledgeable in behavior, because many psychs are not. Many psychs don't have a clue about ABA or functional analysis. So it has to be done by a highly trained psychologist or a BCBA, because the FBA means directly manipulating the environment and the behavioral events of the child, and it must be conducted only by a well-trained behavior analysis or someone else with a high degree of training and experience, because behavior interventions can pose danger to the student if not done correctly. So let me give you an example of that. So let's talk about a kiddo that's screaming in the classroom. And so what does the teacher do? The teacher has one of the aides take the kid out and jump on the trampoline. Well, that's a reward for the kid. They got to get out of the class and they got to go do something fun and jump on the trampoline, which is a reward. So that's would not be in a behavior support plan. That would not be something out of an FBA, because what an FBA does is that it looks at the function of the behavior. So the term functional behavior assessment is a functional assessment or a functional analysis of the behavior to determine what the function of that behavior is. And it's in the field of applied behavior analysis, or ABA. So this is all specific behavior interventions specific to kids with neurological disorders, kids on IEPs, kids on the autism spectrum, kids with ADHD, kids with learning disabilities, all the different neurological deficits and disabilities that kiddos have, that must be done with positive behavior interventions. It's not punitive disciplinary actions, as I said before. When school sites enforce punitive disciplinary actions that they would give to general ed kids, it doesn't teach our kids anything. And in fact, most of the time, it makes it worse, because it just enforces the negative behavior. So ABA is the process of determining the cause or the function of the behavior before developing an intervention plan. The intervention must be based on the hypothesized cause or the function of the behavior. Okay, so they look at the behavior and an FBA, okay, here's the behavior. Now, what is the child getting out of the behavior? What is the thing this child is getting out of having this behavior? What is the function? Where is it coming from? The function of the behavior is a direct result of the student's disability, and it's not willful defiance of bad behavior. It's not willful defiance. And again, our kids will get labeled bad or defiant and instead of having FBAs done so that they can determine the function of behavior and put a positive behavior intervention plan in place. So why should we ask for a functional behavior assessment? Because FBAs ensure the behavior intervention will replace the inappropriate behavior, and that it's going to have the right interventions to replace the inappropriate behavior with appropriate behavior. FBAs find out what the function of the behavior is, so the intervention will be the right intervention for your child. And failure to base the intervention on specific cause or the function of the behavior very often results in ineffective and unnecessary, inappropriate interventions and punitive discipline. So again, identifying the function of the behavior is imperative to provide the right interventions for a student. Okay, so how does the BCBA determine the cause or the function of the behavior? They do the FBA assessment, and they're going to take interviews of the teachers and the parents at the school site. They are going to give questionnaires and rating scales to all the IEP team, or not all of them, but they should give, like, it shouldn't just be, oh, they gave a rating scale to the PE teacher and one to the mom. That's not going to gather the right information. It needs to be observations, and information needs to be gathered across the student's day in order to make sure that all the behaviors that are being exhibited across the school day is included in the function behavioral assessment. And so they do interviews and rating scales. They do direct and systematic observations of the student's behavior. So there, again, those observations need to be done across the student's day. And then they're going to look at manipulating different environmental events to see how the behavior changes. Because when you manipulate an environment, a child's behavior changes. So that's what BCBAs do. They know how to manipulate environments to change the child's behavior, and they also know how to write positive behavior intervention plans to replace the negative behavior with appropriate behavior. Okay, so the second thing that happens is a positive behavior intervention plan is developed, and it's developed out of the information that was gained in the FBA, because now they know the function of the behavior. So a BIP, a behavior intervention plan, will show the antecedent, meaning what does it look like before the behavior occurs, and then what happens after the behavior occurs. So it looks at the antecedents, it looks at the behavior, and then it looks at the consequences after the behavior occurs. And then they write their plan accordingly to, well, this is the environment, and this is what sets this kid off to do this behavior, and then this is the best plan that we can put into place to replace that inappropriate behavior with positive behavior. Okay, so that's basically what a BIP does. Specifically, the idea of the functional behavior assessment and the behavior intervention plan is to identify behaviors that interfere with a child's ability to learn and participate in general education. So when kids have behaviors that interfere or impede their ability to learn and access the curriculum, those behaviors they must write a positive behavior intervention plan for. The problem is they don't. And so parents, you must ask for this. So it's so important to stress that a BIP, a BIP, a behavior intervention plan, is an intervention plan that will specifically define the intervention responsible by the school personnel regarding certain targeted behaviors. So that's what a BIP's purpose is, and the BIP must be implemented across settings, across that child's school day. It's a legal document, and it must be implemented. It's very, very important that an autism specialist or a board-certified analyst, a BCBA, reviews the FBA and the BIP for adequacy. Okay, so now let's go on to number 3, an ERMS assessment / RAP assessment. An ERMS assessment is the acronym is ERMAHS, and and it stands for Educationally Related Mental Health Services. And a WRAP, WRAP, it stands for Wrap Around Services. These are mental health services because some students experience mental health needs that impact their social, emotional functioning, and academic performance. Educationally related mental health services are essential elements of a student's IEP to allow them to access their learning. The purpose of ERMS is to provide specific interventions related to education and academic functioning. So again, you have to ask for an ERMS assessment or they're not just going to offer it to you, parents. So there's so many kids that have emotional and social things going on right now, especially. So this can be depression, this can be anxiety, this can be perseveration on thoughts that they can't get out of their head. This can, stress, whatever is impeding your child's ability to be successful in their education, and it's a mental health issue, that falls under an ERMS assessment. And it's conducted to determine what mental health services your child needs. And they do it through observations. So the assessment will be done through observations again, interviews with parents and school site personnel, and look at the case history of the child, and then the services that will come out of an ERMS or a WRAP assessment can look like. They can write new accommodations, they can write new goals, they can write a behavior intervention plan if one wasn't already written. They can provide counseling for the parent or the child. So it's individual counseling, it could be parent counseling, or it could be both parents and kids together, or it can be group counseling with other kids. And also now, if you have an ERMS assessment and an ERMS provider is providing services to your child, that ERMS provider, who is a mental health professional, will be sitting on your IEP team when you have your IEPs. So now you're going to have another IEP team member who specializes in mental health services. So those are the three main things, parents, that you need to ask for if your child is exhibiting any kind of maladaptive, disruptive, social, emotional behaviors that are impeding their ability to access their curriculum. Those are your rights, and those things will protect your child from being set on the very dangerous path of the school to prison pipeline. So next week is going to be my third part 3 of my 3-part series, School to Prison Pipeline. I'm going to be talking about suspensions and expulsions. And expulsions means a manifestation determination meeting for a child in an IEP. I'm going to be explaining that to you and to make sure that that never happens for your kiddo. So please like and share this video, parents, so that other moms and parents can get this information, especially today. It's just such an issue for kids, especially in this virtual school and what we are experiencing in our world today. And I hope that you enjoyed this information that I shared with you today. You can go to my Facebook page and ask me questions on there as well. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below in this video. I'm Valerie Abrahamian, the IEP Navigator, and I assist and coach and support parents to make sure they get the IEP their child needs to thrive, both in school and in life after high school. So thanks, everyone, and God bless, and I'll see you next week.